Hey everyone, JL here, and welcome back to Bridge the Divide, where I examine irrational beliefs, the irrational behaviors that follow, and how we can bridge the societal divides that they create. Today, we're actually going to take a look at someone I've covered on this channel before. Normally, I look for someone new to cover, but this video was so atrocious I had to jump on it immediately. You know him well. He's back and he's got back. Mr. Kyle Butt of the World Video Bible School. No, we are not going to poke fun at Kyle's name so much this go-around. And that's because, as you will soon see, we won't have to. Now, I must preface all of this by pointing out two things. Number one, Kyle references a great number of extremely complex scientific topics, like physics, abiogenesis, cosmology, evolutionary biology, and neurophysiology. He also does some quick dives into philosophy. And secondly, I feel it necessary to disclose that Kyle has absolutely zero experience or formal training in any of these fields. Taken from apologeticspress.org, Kyle graduated from Freed-Hardeman, a Tennessee-based private university associated with the Churches of Christ. While there, he earned a BA with a double major in Bible and Communication, an MA in New Testament Studies, and a Master's of Divinity with a concentration in apologetics. Now, while I understand that formal education is not necessarily gatekeeping from a rudimentary understanding of any particular field, there are areas within those fields that I mentioned before that do require formal education and some real-world application to actually speak at depth on. So, with all of that in mind, take it away, Mr. Butt. Damn it.
Socrates once stated that we should follow the argument wherever it leads.
And right out of the gate, Kyle here is cherry-picking to suit his narrative. In Plato's Republic 394d, Socrates states to Adeimantus, the metaphorical illustration, "You see, I myself really don't know yet, but wherever the argument like a wind tends, thither must we go." But the continuation of that thought is, if we value reasoning and regard it as a legitimate source of truth, we should and must follow the path of our reflections no matter where they lead. While researching for this video, I discovered that many Christians have seemingly hijacked the first part of this Socratic principle to justify their bad argumentation for the existence of the Christian God. For if we hold to the Socratic principle, then it follows that if we value reason, then we would recognize that bad argumentation, circular reasoning, or emotional appeals should always be avoided as they get us no closer to the truth. I would actually hazard that Kyle knows this and deliberately left it out.
When we look at the most profound question of life, does God exist? We should certainly follow his advice. When we do, we'll find evidences that show us God is real.
No, we won't. And while this can get a bit thick in some sections, I'll do my best to explain why.
Let's look at 6 proofs that show God exists.
6, huh? Honestly, given the definition of evidence, just 1 would have been enough, but hey, you do you, Mr. Butt.
Number 1, the universe must have a cause.
Okay, first one, and we're already in deep. Foremost, it must be stated that this is actually a physics question. And it's not just a physics question, it's one of the biggest and most discussed of all physics questions. I would also point out that, as stated in the intro, Kyle here is not a physicist. He's not even a scientist. And that's why he makes a couple mistakes in this statement alone. First, when he says the universe, it's unclear if he's referring to the beginning of space-time, or to the expanding visible universe itself, or both. To get the most intellectually honest answer, he really needs to clarify this. Secondly, stating positively that the universe must have a cause is problematic because we literally are empirically separated from before the Planck epoch. There are a number of competing hypotheses regarding the state of the universe before the beginning of space-time, but we have no data points to justify any conclusions. We simply, at this point, right now, cannot know. But there are people who are working on it. And lastly, we already know that Kyle is going to assert that God is the cause. And this is just the God of the gaps argument, an appeal to emotion and an argument from incredulity. We don't have an answer, and putting God as the answer seems to solve the problem sufficiently. Having an answer satisfies the emotional appeal of needing life to have some inherent purpose or meaning, and Kyle can't see the universe forming any other way. So it must be God. Were we to be honest with our reasoning, we would reject this.
The most fundamental law of science is the law of cause and effect.
Incorrect. The most fundamental law would be the second law of thermodynamics. No matter the observation, no matter the theory, the second law is the most fundamental in the universe.
And it says that for every material effect we see, there is a cause that came before it or was simultaneous to it, and that is greater than it.
That's a very strange way of wording it. For clarity, the law of causality is a universal law which states that every single action in the universe produces a reaction, no matter what. Now, I searched high and low for Kyle's particular definition of the law of causality, but I couldn't find it anywhere. And if you'll look closely, the devil's in the details. Upon closer examination, what we see is that Kyle has specifically added the greater than it as a way to smuggle in his God, as the only thing that could potentially be greater than the universe itself, by definition, would be God. But even if there were something greater than the universe, this still would not be evidence for any God. Unless, of course, you presuppose that it is.
The universe is a material effect.
Actually, Kyle, the universe is a combination of matter, energy, and information. And there is no evidence whatsoever to support the conclusion that the universe is an effect of anything.
So what caused the universe?
We have no idea, and neither do you.
You see, if you don't believe in a creator, then you have to suggest something like a singularity. That's what is popular today.
This is not what's meant by singularity. Kyle's lack of education in physics is the reason he's making this basic mistake. Also, disbelief in a creator doesn't mean that we have to assert anything in its place as a cause for the universe. We could just be intellectually honest and say we don't know, and reserve judgment until the evidence is in. This wholesale, dishonest representation of atheism is getting pretty old, Kyle.
That there was some type of singularity that exploded in something called the Big Bang.
Also incorrect. The Big Bang was not an explosion, it was an expansion. And the singularity is not something that physically exists. It's a mathematical extrapolation. And you'd know this, Kyle, had you paid attention in school, and you wouldn't be talking out of your, well, you know.
But then when you try to get down to the bottom of what's a singularity, well, what we hear from the scientific community that suggests to us, the cosmologists, they say, well, a singularity was something that popped into existence from nothing.
It's his butt. He's talking out of his butt.
Do you know that if there ever were a time when there was nothing, that's exactly what we would have now? The idea that something popped into existence from nothing is simply not a scientific idea.
No, it isn't. But it is a theistic idea. Christians believe that God created everything out of nothing. No physicist claims that something came out of nothing. This is not the first lie that we'll catch Kyle in during this video.
You see, they're suggesting that that singularity is somehow natural, but it behaves supernaturally.
Another lie. Physicists do not claim that something that they can't explain yet was supernatural. Again, this is a theist claim.
They say that that singularity wouldn't have followed the laws of nature.
That's because technically it doesn't exist. It's a mathematical extrapolation that describes a point in space where there is a mass with infinite density.
Well then, so what are we left with? We're left with the fact that the universe had a beginning and it was not a natural cause. It was something above nature. It was something super nature. Something supernatural.
The level of dishonesty and misrepresentation of science here is truly staggering. Yes, space-time itself has an origin, but we currently have absolutely no way of knowing if it was a result of a spontaneous occurrence or a result of natural processes. And yet Kyle here asserts that it had to be above nature, or supernature. See how he smuggled in God again? Quick question for you, Kyle. By what methodology are you able to determine the difference between an unexplained natural process and a supernatural event? Let's see if he can answer that one honestly.
And so, when we see the material effect of the universe, we can know that there was a supernatural creator that caused the universe.
Nope. This has all been a misrepresentation of physics, the God of the gaps, and an argument from incredulity. Well, that's one down. Let's see if Kyle does any better on the next 5.
Proof number 2. Design demands a designer.
The watchmaker analogy? Really? Kyle, I thought we were past this.
It is a truism that everybody recognizes that this universe looks designed.
Bullshit. That is a bald-faced lie. It's only a truism if you presuppose that God exists, which we know from before is just begging the question.
In fact, when we see the various different aspects of nature and we see birds and squirrels and trees.
Look at the trees! Just look at the trees! This is just confirmation bias. If you're looking for God in nature, you're bound to find God in nature.
And we see all of the things that they do so well. Many times, we as humans, we try to copy and mimic that design, but often we don't do nearly as well as the design that we see in nature.
All of that was completely irrelevant. Humans are inspired by things that occur in nature, so we invent things that simulate those things. Still not evidence for any God, just evidence that as a species, we're pretty innovative when it comes to making our lives easier.
We look at the design of the human body and the human hand and the arm and the leg and the brain, and we see that those are some of the most advanced, technologically savvy pieces of equipment ever put together, and we try to mimic them and copy them, and we can't do it as well. Why?
Oh, this is getting ridiculous. You know what? From now on, for all the smuggling he does, Kyle's new nickname is the Coyote. First issue, there is nothing to support that the human body was designed. In point of fact, complexity is not a hallmark of design. Simplicity is. If the human body was designed, its designer needs to be fired immediately. And secondly, the Coyote here is apparently not up to speed on the progress being made with prosthetics, or in robotics over at Boston Dynamics.
Because this universe exhibits design from the starry sky at night to the fingertips on your hand.
No, it actually doesn't. This is another confirmation bias as a direct result of our brain's natural affinity for pattern seeking. Nothing more.
The design is overwhelming. It's everywhere. Where does design originate? Well, what you and I both know is that when you see things that function and they're complex, that design comes from an intelligent designer.
And this is the watchmaker analogy, or watchmaker argument. It is a teleological argument, or an argument for the proof of God. The idea that the complex functions of the universe were akin to the complex inner workings of a timepiece is an old one, going all the way back to Isaac Newton. It developed against the backdrop of the rise in machine technology and the emergence of mechanical philosophy. But it was William Paley who, standing on the backs of Descartes, Voltaire, De Fontenelle, and Cicero, who formulated the analogy in his book, Natural Theology. However, it was our old friend David Hume that pretty much laid waste to it with 3 simple objections. First, Humans have no experience of world making, so therefore are unable to distinguish between that which makes worlds and that which does not. Secondly, the analogy is a bad one because the universe and a watch don't have enough relevant similarities to really be analogized. And third, that even if the universe were designed, it still would in no way be evidence of the Christian God.
Big explosions just simply don't bring about order. They don't cause things that are functional and complex to come into existence.
Hume addressed this when he later drew upon the problem of evil to propose the Epicurean hypothesis, that it could be argued that the chaotic nature of the origin of the universe could give rise, by chance, to naturally evolving systems of order if given enough time. No intelligent designer needed.
The design we see in the universe demands a supernatural, intelligent designer.
Nope. This inference is fallacious. To assert design, you must first demonstrate a designer. It's just more precept nonsense.
Proof number 3. Life demands a supernatural life giver.
I really don't understand why he speaks like that. I promise it will be over soon. Oh, and if you think Kyle's lack of understanding of physics was bad, just wait till you see how little he understands about abiogenesis.
You see, in the material world, we have come to understand that there is a law of biology called the law of biogenesis.
This is not an actual law. Biogenesis basically states that life comes from life. It was conceptualized by Louis Pasteur, encompassing the belief that complex living beings only come from other living beings by means of reproduction.
Law of biogenesis simply says this, that in this material, natural world, life comes from previously existing life of its own kind.
I also couldn't find this particular definition that Kyle's using anywhere. I'm pretty certain he just made it up, notably because of the inclusion of the word kind, which is taken straight from the Bible and is not a scientific term by any stretch. And yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence.
Now, when we look at how people used to think about life, they said, no, life can arise spontaneously from non-living chemicals.
This is called abiogenesis, and it was the ancient Greeks who first considered it as a possibility.
And yet every single biological experiment has shown us that that simply is biologically impossible.
Kyle here is obviously unaware of the Planet Simulator at McMaster University, which was designed to do just that. The Planet Simulator consists of a sophisticated climate chamber to study how the building blocks of life were assembled and how these prebiotic molecules transitioned into self-replicating RNA molecules. It was kicked off in 2018, and they've already achieved protocells.
Life doesn't arise from non-living chemicals.
Actually, it does. This is a solved science. We fully understand all of the possible ways that abiogenesis could have occurred. We just don't know which one in particular it was. Hence, the Planet Simulator.
From where did life arise?
Best hypothesis based on the evidence? Hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean around 3.5 billion years ago.
Where did life originate if it doesn't arise from non-living chemicals? You see, the idea that there's no God suggests to us that there had to be some singularity without a cause that exploded, and that explosion brought about design, which we've never, ever seen happen. And then, ultimately, somewhere the non-living chemicals gave rise to life. But that's biologically impossible.
All of this was just an argument from incredulity and an ignorance of the current science. And to quote my favorite organic chemist, that's not my problem.
Life demands a supernatural creator.
Surprisingly not the most bullshit statement that Kyle will make in this vid.
Proof number 4. Moral law demands a moral law giver.
Great. First he misrepresented physics, then he butchered abiogenesis, now we're on to philosophy. I mean, this couldn't possibly get any worse, right?
If some things are objectively morally right and other things are objectively morally wrong, then there must be a God.
God damn it. This is just bad. There is nothing to support any form of moral objectivity anywhere. Behaviors are based entirely upon the subjective values that we humans give things. Actions are deemed moral, amoral, or immoral based solely upon the immediate consequences of those actions. But because the subjective interpretation of any particular act can lead to conflicting consequences, the very notion of what is moral is subjective to the interpreter and to the society that the interpreter lives in.
You see, if we evolved from primordial slime over multiplied millions of years, at what point did objective moral values arise?
Wow, just rushed right past that primordial soup hypothesis, didn't he? The reason for this dishonesty is just salesmanship. When we say that, evolutionary game theory explains that moral frameworks arose from the primitive understanding that cooperative actions yielded better results long-term for the group than selfish actions, and thus basic rules were created, then moral frameworks, then laws to reinforce those frameworks, all of which are imposed by the agreed-upon societal authority. That makes sense and is not easily dismissed. But when someone bum rushes you with the assertion that morals came from slime with zero context, yeah, that would be hard to believe. This dishonest tactic brought to you by El Coyote.
We don't look at a dog and say that that dog objectively, morally violated some rule when he steals a bone from another dog. We don't say, hey, he violated a objective moral value. We just don't say that.
And there's no reason to say that humans do it either. That's because objective morality exists for dogs as much as it exists for humans. Hey Kyle, your anthropocentrism is showing.
But we do say that humans can perpetrate things that are objectively morally wrong, that humans can be involved in things that are morally right. If that's true, there must be a God.
And it isn't true. We subjectively agree in our society what is morally wrong and morally right. But this differs from society to society. In America, self-termination is taboo, ignorantly regarded as weak, cowardly, and often an act born out of mental illness. But say in a country like Japan, not only is it tolerable, but it's often regarded as a morally responsible action. And a rudimentary study of human history is the best evidence for the subjective nature of human morality.
Proof number 5, free will exists.
Apparently, Kyle wasn't satisfied with just butchering physics and philosophy. He wants that shit ground chuck.
The atheistic idea that there is no God is founded on the idea of materialism.
Oh, he's going to misrepresent atheism now too. Firstly, materialism is not an ideology. It's a philosophy. Secondly, atheism is not founded on materialism. Atheists reject supernatural explanations by virtue of their rejection of the unsupported claim of God or gods. Materialism and or methodological naturalism generally follows.
The idea that this material world is all that there is, all that there was, and all that there ever will be. Because of that, atheism has to suggest that you as a person don't really have free will.
See? I told you that wouldn't be the most bullshit statement he made in this vid. This assertion actually kind of pissed me off a bit. Primarily because it demonizes atheists by suggesting that we think humans are just automatons enslaved to a deterministic universe, which we don't. And it must be stated that there is an entire half of Christianity that does believe that. And they're called Calvinists. Currently, there are arguments for and against free will, and what form that free will, if any exists, actually takes. There is a very cool video about free will in a deterministic universe that I've linked in the description that I think you all may enjoy. The jury is still out, but we can say with honesty that we human beings, simply because we are not omniscient, we do perceive that we have free will. But that may be because we have no choice in the matter.
That there is no being inside of your body or brain that is supermatter.
Yep, more bullshit. Kyle here actually stole the term supermatter from the game Space Station 13. Here, he's just applying it to the concept of a soul.
That really what's going on in your brain is just electrons bouncing around, and you're the product of those bounces, and you don't really make decisions on your own. It's just the physical laws and properties going on in your brain.
Just the physical laws and properties going on in your brain. Nice way to misrepresent all of neuroscience there, Kyle. Apparently, Kyle has never operated or seen in operation an MRI, which is an amazing tool that has been used in countless experiments to gain further understanding of what goes on in the brain during decision making in response to external stimuli.
If you are watching this video of your own volition, then the fact of the matter is there has to be a God that can account for that free will that you as a person have.
You chose to watch a video, so God exists? Are you kidding me?
There has to be a God if there is free will.
And nothing but an emotional appeal and an argument from ignorance. Well, only one left. Let's see if Kyle can at least get something right, other than counting to 5.
And proof number 6, human reasoning.
Spoke too soon.
You see, we reason on a regular basis. We understand abstract ideas. If we were products of blind, chance, random processes over multiplied millions of years, reasoning and the laws of reasoning simply would have no explanation.
More arguments from incredulity and ignorance. Kyle, just because you don't or you refuse to understand the science that explains neural functionality is not our problem. We understand that our ability to reason is situated in the cerebrum, and that is because people who suffer severe damage to the cerebrum, more specifically the left hemisphere portion, dramatically lose their ability to reason. This is also comparative in other species, as we have observed a correlation between capacity for reason and development of those areas of the brain. And experimental testing reveals that octopi, cetaceans, elephants, and chimpanzees are among the species on this planet that are also capable of reasoning.
And yet we reason together on a regular basis. From where does reason arise?
I already explained the left hemisphere of the cerebrum. It's like you don't even listen, Kyle.
It's got no naturalistic, atheistic explanation.
Yeah, because atheism isn't neuroscience, which is a field that provides a naturalistic explanation.
Antony Flew, the atheist who wrote Theology and Falsification, the most popular atheistic paper for the last 100 years, the last century.
I wouldn't say the most popular in the last century, but it certainly was up there. Antony Flew's article argued that claims about God were merely vacuous, where they could not be tested for truth or falsehood. And he was right. But there's something about Antony Flew that I know that I want to see if the coyote here will represent honestly.
In 2006, he co-wrote a book titled There Is a God.
He did. Towards the end of his life, Flew did in fact change his position. At the age of 81, he co-wrote the book There Is a God with Roy Abraham Verghese. It has been proposed that Verghese may have had more to do with the writing than Flew really did, because Flew was already suffering from the advanced effects of dementia.
How the world's most notorious atheist became a believer. He stated that his rule of life had always been to follow the evidence where it leads. And he said he followed that evidence. And it led him to the conclusion that there is a supernatural, intelligent God.
While Kyle has done a little paraphrasing here, he's mostly right. However, there's a very important distinction regarding Flew that I'm waiting to see if Kyle will actually make.
Let's let the evidence lead us to that same conclusion.
Nope, he didn't do it. The important distinction was that Flew became a deist, not a theist. And after careful investigation of the book's writing styles, it was concluded that Flew ultimately fell prey to the god of the gaps and quite possibly Pascal's wager. Odd that Kyle would leave that little bit out, huh? Surely he wouldn't immorally misrepresent a dead man, would he? And that will conclude this look at Kyle Butt's 6 Proofs for God. Thank you all so much for joining me. I know this one was a little longer than usual, and I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit like and subscribe, and be sure to smash that bell for the notifications. And feel free to comment below. I'm always looking for feedback, and I love interacting with all of you in the comment section. On a side note, if you dare to be scared, check out my podcast, Week in Horror, where me and my filmmaker friends deep dive the horror movies that released that week in horror history. All of the reference links and links you need to help support my work are all in the description. I'm JL. Thank you again for joining me. Be safe, be excellent to each other, and together we can bridge the divide.